Why do we keep losing the ones we love even when we give them everything? There is a part of you that has sabotaged every relationship you've ever had. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Today, we go beneath the surface, into the realm Carl Jung called the shadow, and uncover the one truth about love that no one ever told you. You can read every self-help book, recite every affirmation, and still end up alone. Not because you are unworthy, but because a part of you believes you are. This belief isn't conscious. It hides beneath your smile, behind your gestures, and inside your deepest fears. And until you see it, truly see it, no love will ever feel enough. Part 1. The hidden nature of love, and why it always slips away. Love, with all its beauty and ache, is often painted as a gift from the universe, an overwhelming feeling that finds us when we least expect it. But if you've ever loved deeply and still felt empty, if you've ever been loved, yet couldn't hold on to it, then perhaps you've already brushed against a deeper truth. The truth is, love doesn't vanish because we don't try hard enough. It slips away because we don't understand what's happening inside of us. In Carl Jung's world, this isn't failure. It's a signal, an invitation to grow. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Nowhere is this more true than in love. The heartbreaks, the sudden attractions, the betrayals, the ghosting, they're not random. They are reflections of the parts of you still waiting to be seen. When you were a child, you learned love through the eyes and arms of your parents. And if that love was conditional, only given when you were good, quiet, successful, then that version of love became your blueprint. You grow up chasing people who feel emotionally familiar, not necessarily safe. You crave love but push it away the moment it gets too close. Or you fall for people who can't truly love you back because that's what feels normal. The paradox is painful. The more you seek love from others to soothe an inner wound, the more it evades you. Not because you're unworthy, but because a fragmented self can never fully receive what it hasn't accepted within. Love isn't something we win or lose. It's something we awaken to when we reclaim the parts of ourselves we were taught to hide. When you keep searching for love outside yourself, you're really trying to recover something you abandoned long ago. And here's the question, what part of you learned to live without love and why? After all these years, are you still afraid to face it? Part 2. The relational mirror, when others reflect the truth you hide. Every relationship you've ever had, every friend, lover, enemy, or stranger who left an impression wasn't just a person passing through your life. They were a mirror, a reflection, not of who they were, but of who you are. Jung called this the process of projection. What you cannot face within yourself, you will inevitably see in others. If someone triggers you deeply, that reaction isn't always about them. It's about you. Your emotional response is a flare, signaling something within you that wants to be acknowledged. Think back to the last time someone made you feel intensely. Maybe they irritated you or made you feel insecure or strangely drawn. Ask yourself, what exactly did I feel? And what part of me did that feeling come from? Maybe you've been repulsed by someone's arrogance, only to realize later that it mirrors your own unspoken need to feel superior, something you've been too ashamed to admit. Or maybe you're drawn to people who seem free and spontaneous because your own life has been rigid and restrained, and their freedom awakens a longing you've buried under structure. This is the mirror effect. And it works both ways. Just as others reflect parts of you, you reflect parts of them. That's why some people are drawn to you, and others are repelled. Neither reaction is truly about you as a person. It's about what you unconsciously represent to them. The more emotionally intense a connection is, the more revealing it becomes. Romantic attraction, admiration, jealousy, even contempt, they're all signs pointing inward. You're not just reacting to others. You're reacting to the unclaimed pieces of your own psyche. The people who irritate you the most are often your greatest teachers. They show you what you've rejected, disowned, or refused to confront. And the ones you idolize? They reveal the hidden strengths you've yet to fully embody. When you understand this, your relationships become a tool for growth, not just comfort. You stop blaming others and start asking deeper questions. Because the real work begins not when you ask, why are they like that? But when you ask, what are they showing me about myself? Part 3 attraction is not random. It's the map of your subconscious. You don't fall in love by accident. You're not just drawn to a certain type of person. What you call attraction, whether it's magnetic pull or intense aversion, isn't random. It's a map, a subconscious blueprint, laid down long before you knew what you were looking for. Most of us don't fall for people. We fall into patterns. We repeat familiar stories under different names, hoping this time the ending will change. But it never does until we change. Carl Jung believed that we are drawn to people who represent the parts of ourselves we have not yet integrated. And what we resist in others often reflects what we are still avoiding in ourselves. That's why relationships feel so spiritual and so maddening at the same time, because they reveal us to ourselves. Imagine you're constantly attracted to emotionally unavailable people. On the surface, it might seem like bad luck or poor judgment. But look deeper. There's likely a part of you that's terrified of true vulnerability. So you seek connection with those who cannot offer it, because it allows you to feel the longing without ever having to confront the fear of actually being seen. Or maybe you always end up with partners who need to be rescued. You feel needed, valuable, important. But beneath that dynamic is a part of you still longing to be cared for, projecting your unmet needs onto someone else, so you never have to face your own sense of emotional neglect. These patterns aren't flaws. They're signposts. They point toward the exact wounds that need healing. What you find attractive in others often represents a disowned potential within yourself. The artist who inspires you? A creative spark you've buried. The confident leader you admire? A strength you've been afraid to claim. And the toxic partner you can't seem to leave? A familiar pain dressed up as passion. The work isn't to suppress these attractions. It's to understand them. To let them guide you inward rather than outward. To ask, with radical honesty, what part of me is seeking itself through this person? Part 4 Childhood Wounds and the Hidden Architecture of Adult Love. Before you ever spoke a word, before you had a name for love or pain, you learned what connection felt like. You learned it in silence, through the way someone held you or didn't. Through the warmth of a voice, the coldness of a stare, the chaos or calm of your childhood home. These first impressions became architecture, not just of your mind, but of your heart. And without even realizing it, you built your adult relationships on that foundation. If love was given only when you behaved, you learned to perform. If affection came with anger, you learned to walk on eggshells. If you were ignored, you learned to disappear emotionally, spiritually, sometimes even physically. And now, as an adult, you might find yourself loving in those same survival patterns. You chase people who pull away. You overgive to feel worthy. Or you withhold affection, fearing that too much love makes you weak. The child in you is still driving the relationship, still trying to earn a kind of love that should have been unconditional. But Jung's work reminds us, what is unconscious controls us until it becomes conscious. The people we love often resemble the emotional climate we were raised in. Not because we enjoy it, but because it's familiar. And familiarity, even when painful, feels safe. This is why someone kind and consistent might feel boring at first. Not because they lack something, but because you've mistaken stability for emptiness and chaos for passion. We don't just inherit our parents' genetics. We inherit their emotional templates, their way of giving and withholding, their fears, their silence, their unspoken wounds. And until we confront that inheritance, we live it out. Again and again. Not because we're broken, but because we're unfinished. Healing doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means finally understanding it, so you don't repeat it. And here's the question that begins that process. What did love feel like when you were too young to understand it? And how are you still chasing or avoiding that feeling today? Part 5. The Shadow Within, the silent saboteur of every relationship. There's a part of you that you've spent most of your life trying to hide. You call it weakness. You call it shame. You might not even have words for it, only a vague discomfort, a tightening in your chest when someone gets too close. This is your shadow. And it's not evil. It's not the bad version of you. It's simply the part of yourself that you've disowned out of fear, out of survival, out of the belief that certain emotions or traits would make you unlovable. Carl Jung believed the shadow isn't just what we're ashamed of. It's everything we've repressed, our anger, our sensuality, our ambition, our power, but also our creativity, our sensitivity, and our vulnerability. The shadow isn't just dark. It's full of potential we were never allowed to express. And when we refuse to face it, it doesn't disappear. It leaks out into our relationships, into jealousy, passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, into the patterns we don't understand but keep repeating. You might say things like, "I always ruin good relationships," or "I keep attracting the wrong people." But it's not the people, it's the unhealed part of you choosing them. The shadow isn't interested in your happiness. It's interested in your wholeness. So it will keep drawing people and situations that reflect your blind spots until you finally look. It's why you sabotage intimacy just when it starts to feel real. It's why you push people away the moment they see you fully. The shadow fears exposure because it remembers what it was like to be rejected. But ironically, it is only through exposure that we heal. Integration doesn't mean eliminating the shadow. It means welcoming it to the table, listening to its fears, thanking it for protecting you, and then choosing differently. Because once the shadow is no longer hiding, it no longer has to control you. And here's the deeper question. What part of yourself have you spent your whole life rejecting, and what would happen if, just once, you let it speak? Part 6. The allure of what you deny, why you're drawn to what you repress. There's a strange pull you feel towards certain people, people who stir something in you that words can't quite touch. Sometimes it feels like chemistry. Other times, like chaos. Either way, it's intense. And it's not random. That pull is not just about who they are. It's about what they awaken in you. Jung taught us that what we repress doesn't disappear, it waits. And what we admire or obsess over in others is often the echo of something we have exiled within ourselves. You don't just fall for someone's charm, their power, or their freedom. You fall for the part of yourself that sees those traits and whispers, "That could have been me if I hadn't been told to be smaller." Think about it. You're drawn to someone who is unapologetically bold because you've spent your life being careful. You admire someone's creative fire because yours was once mocked or misunderstood. You're mesmerized by someone who lives without fear because fear has been your quiet companion since childhood. Attraction is rarely about the surface. It's a subconscious recognition, a homecoming to the parts of yourself you've never dared to fully live out. This is why so many relationships begin with fire and end with silence. Because what starts as awe becomes confrontation. What you once admired begins to threaten the identity you've built around self-control or humility. You fall for their wildness, then judge it. You crave their confidence, then call it arrogance. But it was never about them. It was about your shadow reaching out through someone else, asking to be acknowledged. It doesn't stop at admiration. The same dynamic happens with the people you can't stand. The ones who trigger your judgment, your anger, your disgust. These are not just annoyances. They are projections, disowned parts of you seeking integration. You resent their selfishness because a part of you longs to say no, to take up space, to stop being everyone's savior. You bristle at their ambition because you've been taught that wanting more makes you greedy. But deep down, you want more. You always have. Until you understand this, you'll keep chasing people who feel like electricity and running from those who feel like truth. You'll confuse trauma bonds with love and call fear excitement. You'll sabotage stable relationships because they don't activate the emotional chaos you've mistaken for passion. But when you start to see your patterns, when you can pause and ask, "Why am I really drawn to this person?" something shifts. You stop chasing wholeness in someone else. You begin reclaiming it from within. This is where integration begins, not in changing who you love, but in understanding why. Not in avoiding emotional triggers, but in using them as doorways. Because every person you're drawn to, whether they stay or leave, is a reflection of something deeper, a part of you longing to come home. And here's the question you must sit with. What qualities in others do you most long for, and what would it mean to finally embody them yourself? Part 7. When Love Becomes Addiction. The Cycle of Toxic Attraction. Love is supposed to set you free. But for many, it becomes a prison, beautiful at first, but slowly suffocating. And what's most tragic is that we don't even recognize it as a prison. We call it passion. We call it devotion. We call it destiny. But what we're often experiencing isn't love. It's emotional addiction. It's the mind and body clinging to a pattern they were conditioned to repeat. When you grow up around inconsistency, you learn to crave emotional highs and lows. You wait for love to arrive and fear its disappearance just as quickly. You mistake anxiety for butterflies. You confuse longing with connection. And every time someone pulls away, it only makes you want them more. That's not love. That's a nervous system trained by trauma. Jung wouldn't have called this addiction in the clinical sense, but he saw the deeper spiritual root: repetition, compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate early wounds in an attempt to resolve them. You're not just choosing the wrong partners. You're trying to rewrite the original story where you weren't seen, weren't chosen, weren't safe. But instead of healing, you reenact. And the outcome never changes. You might say, I keep falling for people who hurt me. But it's more accurate to say, I keep falling for people who activate something unresolved in me. That activation becomes addictive. The emotional chaos feels familiar, even comforting. It gives you something to chase, something to prove. And when they finally show you affection again, it feels like salvation. That intermittent reward, attention given, then withdrawn, is the same cycle that forms behavioral addiction. Your brain releases dopamine not just when love is present, but when it's unpredictable. That's why stable, available partners often feel boring to someone conditioned by chaos. It's not the partner, it's the pattern. But here's the turning point. When you become aware of the pattern, you have a choice. You can keep chasing the storm, or you can learn to find peace in calm waters. The first will feel familiar. The second will feel foreign, even uncomfortable. But one leads to another heartbreak. The other leads to healing. Healing from emotional addiction doesn't mean cutting off desire. It means redefining what desire leads you toward. Does it pull you closer to who you want to become or further into who you've always been trying to escape? You'll know you're healing when you start choosing relationships that don't activate your anxiety, but reflect your wholeness. When you stop feeling the need to prove your worth to be loved, when love no longer feels like survival but like freedom. And so the question becomes, what would it feel like to want someone without needing them to complete you? Part 8. Transmuting Pain. How heartbreak becomes a portal to wholeness. Heartbreak has a sound. Not the shattering of glass, but the quiet collapse of something invisible, an expectation, a future, a version of yourself you believed was finally safe. We've been conditioned to fear this collapse, to see the end of a relationship as a personal failure. But what if heartbreak isn't the end of love, but the beginning of self? Carl Jung believed that pain, when faced consciously, becomes the doorway to individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are. And nowhere is this more visceral than in the pain of loss. Because when someone leaves, they don't just take themselves. They take the illusion you built around them. They take the distraction from the parts of you that still hurt. And in the absence of that distraction, you are left with yourself raw, grieving, unfinished. This is not a punishment. It's an invitation. The moments you feel most broken are often the ones where the ego cracks and something deeper breaks through. You begin to see how much of your identity was built on being loved, on being chosen, on being enough for someone else. And in the silence, in the loneliness, in the long nights of questioning, what emerges is the truth. You were never meant to be completed by another. You were meant to remember that you were whole all along. This doesn't mean you won't feel the ache. You will. Grief is sacred. But it's also alchemical. It burns away the fantasies. It clears the fog. It shows you the shape of your own soul unmasked. The pain isn't pointless. It's pointing you inward. It's asking, Where did you lose yourself in that love? Where did you abandon your own needs, betray your own boundaries, silence your voice to keep someone else from walking away? When you answer these questions not from blame, but from courage, you begin to reclaim what was always yours: your power, your presence, your clarity. Heartbreak becomes not just something you survive, but something that transforms you. It becomes the fire that purifies, the night that births the dawn. Western culture tells us to move on quickly. Distract yourself. Get back out there. But Jungian psychology says, slow down. Go within. Because the relationship that ended was only the surface. What truly ended was a way of being, a self-concept that no longer serves your evolution. This is not about forgetting the person. It's about remembering yourself. The most beautiful rebirths often begin in the rubble of something you thought you couldn't live without. So here's the question: if you stopped seeing heartbreak as punishment and started seeing it as a portal, where would it lead you? Part 9, Returning to Wholeness, when love flows from within, not lack. There comes a moment, quiet and unspectacular, when you no longer feel the need to be completed. When your heart no longer aches for someone to prove your worth. When you stop searching for the missing piece, not because you've given up, but because you've remembered you were never broken. This is what wholeness feels like. Not perfection, not constant joy, but a deep inner stillness. A sense of being rooted in yourself, of knowing who you are, even when the world doesn't reflect it back to you. Jung described this state not as an achievement, but as a return, a coming home to the parts of yourself you once abandoned to survive. When love no longer arises from need, it becomes something sacred. You're not loving someone because you need their validation or attention. You're loving because you are love. You're not seeking a relationship to feel secure. You're entering one from a place of inner safety. And the difference is profound. Most relationships are built on silent contracts. I will give you what you need if you give me what I lack. But these contracts always fail. Because lack cannot be filled by another person. It creates pressure, expectation, resentment, and eventually collapse. But when you return to yourself, when you've seen your shadow, grieved your wounds, honored your complexity, something shifts. Love becomes a gift, not a transaction. Intimacy becomes an act of sharing, not seeking. You no longer need someone to fix you. You simply want to walk beside them, to grow with them, to witness each other's becoming. This doesn't mean you'll never feel fear again. It means you won't let fear decide for you. It means you'll notice the old patterns, the pull toward emotional chaos, the craving for external approval, and instead of obeying them, you'll pause. You'll breathe. You'll choose differently. Wholeness doesn't eliminate longing, but it transforms it. You still desire connection, but not from desperation. You still want love, but not at the cost of yourself. And this creates a new kind of relationship. One based on presence, on mutual growth, on freedom. In this space, arguments aren't threats. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Silence isn't abandonment. You don't interpret every pause as rejection because you no longer carry the wound that demands constant reassurance. You're no longer afraid to be seen because you've already seen yourself. This is the love Jung pointed to, not the fairy tale, not the fantasy, but the union of two whole beings who have walked through their own darkness and emerged, not perfect, but real. So now the question becomes, if you no longer needed love to heal you, what kind of love would you be free to create? Part 10, Love is not something you find, it's who you become. We spend our lives searching for the one, the spark, the feeling that finally tells us we are enough. We scroll through profiles, replay memories, revisit the past like a museum of unfinished stories. But the deeper you go into yourself, the clearer it becomes. Love was never something outside of you. It was never lost. It was buried beneath layers of survival, shame, and forgetting. Carl Jung didn't speak of love as a destination. He spoke of it as a reflection of individuation, the process of becoming whole. And in that wholeness, love is no longer a reward for being chosen. It becomes your nature, something you are. something that radiates effortlessly from the parts of you that have been brought back into harmony. When you embody love not as performance, but as presence, everything shifts. You stop waiting for the right person to make you feel alive. You bring aliveness with you. You stop needing someone to make you feel seen. You become the one who sees with clarity, with compassion, with depth. The relationships that unfold from this space are different. They are not built on fantasy or fear, but on truth. There is room for silence, room for difference, room for growth. You no longer seek to possess someone. You seek to understand them, to walk beside them, not to fill a void, but to honor the journey of becoming together. This kind of love doesn't promise perfection, but it does promise realness, and it welcomes the shadow as much as the light. Because in wholeness, you don't hide your wounds, you reveal them carefully, courageously, and in doing so, you create a space where others feel safe to do the same. So many people wait to be loved in order to feel worthy. But the truth is, worthiness was never the reward. It was always the starting point. You don't have to earn your place in someone's heart by shrinking yourself, by proving your value, by betraying your need. You are not here to audition for love. You are here to embody it. And that begins, not with grand gestures or perfect timing, but with how you speak to yourself in the quiet moments, how you hold your own hand when you're hurting, how you show up for your life when no one's watching. Love is not something you find. It's something you remember. And when you do, when you live from that place, your relationships become extensions of your wholeness, not bandages for your pain. So if you've made it this far, if something in this message stirred something real in you, then maybe it's time. Time to stop searching. Time to start becoming. Because the love you've been waiting for has been waiting for you.